I want to make a quick reminder as we share today. I really believe that these words that we're going to share over the next few minutes are going to cause many of you to think about life in a different way. Maybe many of you will think about putting your faith and your trust in Jesus. And maybe for many it's something that you've done a long time ago, and maybe you're just renewing that commitment and that faith in him today. And that's incredible. We want to celebrate that with you. For many it'll be the first time ever you'll understand the gospel of Jesus and what this whole Christianity thing has really always been about, and you'll be able to put your confidence and hope in Jesus, and we want to celebrate that with you too. And so once we go into the final song, we're going to post that phone number again that you can text either prayer to, or if you've made the decision to follow Jesus, if you're recommitting yourself and your hope and trust in Jesus today, I would really love for you to just text Jesus to that number that we'll show you again during the final song. We'd love to hear from you today and celebrate that with you. And so we're going to jump into the message. We're starting a new series today called Shaken. And so before we get into that, I just want to talk for a minute. I don't know if you're like me, but I love motorcycles. I've owned a few over the years. And one of the things about motorcycles is that when you ride them, things hit you in the face, right? And so I can't tell you how many times I've been riding and someone drops something out the window of their car, it hits the road, it bounces up, and I have a whole body, but for some reason it always hits my face. I've been hit by pebbles kicked up by cars in front of me. You get hit a lot by bugs as you're riding down the street. They go in your mouth, they go in your teeth. It's super, super fun. Now, I was telling that story one time to my dad, and he one-upped me, and he said that the worst he'd ever experienced on his motorcycle was that he was cruising down the highway at highway speed, which, just so you know, is a very relative term. But so he was cruising down the highway, and all of a sudden, he literally thought he got shot in the head by a gun. It turned out he had been hit in the forehead by a June bug at highway speed. And so I then was telling his story to my roommate at the time, who one-upped his story, and it turned out he had been riding his motorcycle down a rural highway at highway speed, again a relative term, and his exhaust scared a bunch of geese that were hanging out alongside the road in a ditch. Well, it turned out he looked up just in time to catch a goose full on in the face at highway speed. He knew that he was not going to be able to hold on to those handlebars. He felt like his head was being taken off his body. Right? And so he's scattering, he's swerving all over the road. He thinks he's going to eat it at this point. Right? And he's scared to death. He eventually gets the motorcycle under control. He didn't crash it, but he was certainly shaken. Right? And that happens to us so often in life. Right? Things in life hit us and we get shaken. And sometimes it's just little things. It's like the bugs. It's annoyances, it's frustrations, it's things that just bother you. But sometimes it's the June bug. It's actually painful. It's startling. It's unsettling. And sometimes it's the goose. Sometimes things hit us in life where we don't know how we're going to hold on to the controls. We don't know how we're going to keep going in light of what happened. And that's the moment when life shakes you. You see, the Apostle Peter is the book of 1 Peter is written by the Apostle Peter. It just shows you he wasn't super creative with the name, right? But the Apostle Peter wrote the book of 1 Peter to Christians who were scattered all over their known world by persecution. Fierce persecution had broken out in Jerusalem, which had scattered the Christians all over to cities all over the place. And for a while that helped the scattering, but persecution eventually caught up with the early church in all the cities that they went to. And so it was not easy to be a Jesus follower at that point in history. And so the believers, they were being blackballed economically. People wouldn't buy from their businesses. They couldn't make money. They were being shut out of the economy. In fact, they were being blackballed socially as well. No one would interact with the believers in many of these cities, right? And they were actually becoming the social scapegoats of many of the larger problems in society in that day. And so now they were the target of public scorn and dislike. And so the believers, they were being arrested, they were being imprisoned, they were being beaten and even killed during this time. And it was just a terrible, hard time to follow Jesus. And so many were feeling it. They were feeling shaken by it all. They were like the guy on the motorcycle with the goose in the face. They didn't know if they were going to be able to hang on to the controls. And so the Apostle Peter is writing this book, this letter to these shaken believers. And the funny thing is he's writing it not as this person who's impervious to fear or impervious to pain. Peter is writing the letter as a person who himself had been shaken. You see, Peter was normally very self-assured. He was very quick to insert himself in situations and circumstances. He thought he had it all together, right? He actually even said at one point, Jesus warned the 12. He said, listen, I'm going to be betrayed. I'm going to be killed, and you guys are going to lose your confidence in me. You're going to lose your faith, and you're going to run, and you're going to hide. And Peter says, no way, Jesus. Not me. I'm fearless. I will follow you anywhere. Nothing will shake me. And in that same day, he denies even knowing Jesus 3 times. And as soon as he realizes what he's done, he realizes what happened. The Bible says he wept bitterly. And it didn't stop. He went into a tailspin. He left town. He went back to fishing. He really, he was shaken in ways that maybe in this season we can kind of understand. So to put it simply, Peter was a person who was himself shaken, and he was saddened, and he was surprised by the way that the circumstances shook him. But the truth is that God is so merciful, and God still used Peter's life to accomplish great things. In fact, these moments in time when Peter himself was shaken, they deepened Peter's compassion for others who would later be shaken. These times they taught him how to show the way forward to someone who hasn't been fearless, to someone who hasn't been flawless, which is of great hope to us in this season. Because like Peter, so many of us, we've been shaken. Life hits us, and we get the controls for a minute, but then something else happens, something else comes, and we're shaken again, and we just don't know how to proceed. So the whole theme of this book of 1 Peter is about how to become steadfast in shaky times, how to become a person that can keep moving forward even when life is completely uncertain. So we're going to read some verses together from 1 Peter. It says this in 1 Peter 1 verses 3 through 5. It says, in his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. This inheritance is kept in heaven for you, who through faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed at the last time. So we're going to break this verse down for a few minutes and share a little bit of an imaginary story to help us understand it. But here's what that verse is saying, is that the true hope of the Christian church is a whole new world, not just new stuff or new situations in this world. And you see, here's just the truth, is that in our era of the world, in our era, much of Christian thought and concern has been focused on this life and this world and all of the conditions that come with that. Right? There's just so much focus in these days on what what blessings God has for us now and what fullness of life looks like now. Here's God's plan for a better family. Here's God's plan for better finances. Here's God's plan for better health and for a brighter smile and thinner eyebrows or whatever it is. We've got all these plans for God's assistance and God's truth and how it's going to make this life better. And the truth is, all that stuff is true. It's very true. It's very good. And it's very useful. But one thing we have to remember, God does want to bless you. God does want to prosper you. But the main focus of the work of Jesus was not to reinsert blessing in this life and in this age. The blessing and fullness that Jesus achieved is primarily focused on the world and the reality that will be unveiled in the age to come. So yeah, God does want to bless you now. God does want to do good things for you now. But the real deal here is what is still to come in the age to come. We read this verse in Revelation last week, but we're going to read it again because it talks about that day. It talks about the day that everything Jesus did is pointed at, the return of Jesus, the restoration of the world. So I'm going to read Revelation 21 verses 1 through 5 again, and we're going to look at what it says. And so it says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God as a bride beautifully prepared for her husband." And what that's saying, well, it's a very poetic way of saying that right now God and the realm of heaven is somewhere else, detached from here. But there's a day coming when heaven and earth will reunite, where God will bring the heavens back to the earth and things will be restored the way that they were intended to be. So that's what it's saying. As a bride beautifully dressed for her husband, and I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them and will be their God." And I love this part. And it says he will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. And he who was seated on the throne said, "I am making everything new." See, we're in the old order of things still today. We're in the order that includes crying and death and pain and tears. But what this promises is that there is a day coming that when what Jesus accomplished will result in a new order, in the making of things new, and no more tears and no more crying and no more pain and no more death. You see, in 1 Peter, we were told that our real reward was being held for us in heaven. And now what we just read in Revelation 21 describes the moment when what's being held for us currently in heaven is reunited with the earth. And so in that moment, the reward that's kept in heaven for the earth, it begins to invade the earth and it transforms it again to make it into all that God originally intended it to be, and what Jesus' sacrifice paid the way to make it again. So the point of all of this is this: the central work of Jesus has always been inviting us into a whole new world that begins when this world ends for us. I want you to kind of follow me with this imaginary story. I want you to imagine a vast and amazing city. A city that's ages and ages old, with a proud history and a great people with great abilities and great intelligences and great accomplishments. And there's this amazing city. But somewhere along the way, this city was infiltrated and it was taken over by a harsh and crooked dictator. And this dictator, he surrounded himself with dangerous and crooked officials and with a brutal army. And this government they set up, it regularly seizes the belongings and the wealth produced by the people living in this once great city. And so now these once great people, they live precarious lives, never knowing when what they have will be stolen by bandits, never knowing how much crooked generals will extort from them, never knowing how much their government will just take from them and call taxes. And people are often sick and dying with no help from their government. And they live in fear of crime and criminals because it's just out of control, because this government only enforces law and order where it benefits them. So picture this city with me. And now imagine that outside this city lives a benevolent benefactor, this loving Lord who wants to help the people in the city. And as it turns out, this benevolent benefactor, he actually is the one who established and built this city ages and eons ago before it was taken over. Now, this benevolent benefactor, he sends representatives into the city with goods and supplies and help for people, but much of it is embezzled by the government and the army. And then most of what's left over after the embezzlement is stolen by lawless residents in the city. And so as the years go by, the benevolent benefactor, he tries every means possible of sending help and blessing and good resources into the city. But because of all we just mentioned, there's just little to show for it. And so this benevolent benefactor, he embraces a new strategy. And he goes to work building a new city just beyond the borders of the original city. But this new city now requires a personal invitation from the benefactor himself to enter it. In fact, the son of the benefactor is able to vouch for people in such a way that his father lets them in. So entrance into the new city is only made possible by knowing the son of the benefactor. And so because of this new city is safe and it's secure, and the benefactor is able to invest everything he has into making this new city a flawless, rich, and eternal home for the people. And so the approach of the benefactor now has shifted entirely. So he continues to send representatives now into the old city, but now his primary focus is inviting those in the old city to come and live in the new city. And so all of the wealth and the reward and the riches that the benefactor would love to send to his people in the old city, now he simply just sends it ahead of them into the new city. And there it'll be absolutely safe. In the new city, it will not be stolen. It will not be worn out. It will not be perverted or used up. And so the benefit of the resources given by the benefactor to the residents of the new city, they will never wear out. Now, the only downside is that for most who accept the invitation into the new city, there's a period of time that they must wait before they're able to cross the border from the old city into the new. So in the meantime, the residents of the old city who are, ultimately they're bound for the new city, but in the meantime, the residents of the old city who are bound for the new city, they've learned to find each other and to band together and to make the most together of their time in the old city. And so they love each other and they encourage each other and they share resources together with each other, and they devote themselves to encouraging their fellow old city residents to accept the invitation of the benefactor and to meet the son, so that these old city residents can ultimately go to the new city one day as well. Now, there are times, even in the old city, when the residents experience some level of blessing and good. Now, usually that's simply because of the way that they've begun to bless each other. So as these residents have found themselves and found each other, they're banding together and they shower such blessing and love on each other that usually that's the source of it. But even more than that, the benefactors still at times find ways to slip blessings and good things past the crooked generals and the crooked army and the crooked dictator. But as good as those slipped blessings are, they don't even compare to what is stored up and waiting in the new city. Because this is what that verse in Peter is telling us, is that through the death and resurrection of Jesus, we have been given birth into an entirely different hope. It's not just a cleaned up, straightened back out, ironed back out version of our current reality. We have a hope that is unfading, it's unspoiling, and it's kept safe from every kind of loss. We have a hope that's not limited by this current world. Our hope is in another world entirely. It's in another city entirely. And that was the first encouragement given by Peter to those who felt shaken by this world. But then he goes on and he shares this in verses 6 through 9. He says, in all of this, you greatly rejoice. Now, when he says, in all of this, you greatly rejoice, he's talking about what we just discussed. In the fact that you have a hope that is unperishing now. You have a hope that is unshakable. You have a city now that's waiting for you that nothing in this city can affect or shake. So in all of this, you rejoice greatly. Though now, for a little while, you may have to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. And that's a day that we're walking in, right? We can rejoice in what awaits us, but we will have to suffer some grief in all kinds of trials. But listen to what he says in verse 7. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, it may result in praise and glory and honor when Jesus is revealed. Though you have not seen him, you love him. Even though you do not see him now, you believe in him and are filled with an inexpressible joy. For you are now receiving the end result of your faith, the salvation of your souls. I love what he says there at the end because that's what focuses the whole thing. You are receiving the result of your faith, the salvation of your souls. So he brings the whole thing down to the big point. And that's the point I want to make next, is that there's only one thing you get to take with you from this city into the new city. Peter says that these Christians, they've suffered many trials, and he says they're going to suffer even more. Like, he's not minimizing it. He's not downplaying it. He's not denying it or trying to make light of it. He's saying, listen, you've gone through a lot, and many of you will suffer even more. But then he takes the focus off the actual loss. He says, sure, yes, understand this. You will lose stuff. You'll lose some money. You'll lose some influence. You'll lose some jobs and some health. And back then, even many of them were losing their life. But he says, listen, the stuff that you lose pales in comparison to what you gain. Besides, ultimately, all you can lose is the old city and its contents. And what you will gain at the loss of the old city is the new city and all that it contains, and it's eternal and it's incorruptible. And so what you lose is nothing in comparison to what you gain. And then he goes on to talk about the fact that this suffering produces something in them. He says the pressure of the suffering, he compares it to gold being refined by fire. Now, we're not like metalsmiths or anything, but I think we have a basic enough understanding of a refiner's fire to understand what Peter was saying. See, with the refining fire, the hotter the fire gets, the more of the impurities and the extras and the junk get burned out, leaving behind something that's more valuable, something that's purer, something that's more beautiful. And so the gold on the other side of the fire is purer gold. It's more valuable gold. It's a more brilliant, more reflective, more beautiful product than what you started with, even though it went through fire to get there. And so Peter is reminding us of something here that we know is true, but we just don't really like to think about very often, and it's this: suffering refines us. Suffering grows us. Suffering deepens us as people. It strengthens us. And so Peter says that the refining, it causes Jesus to be revealed in us. And I want to share just personally, I don't know if you guys have noticed this in your own life, but personally, I realize every time I go through any form of trial, any form of suffering, there's something I always realize on the backside of it. You see, on the backside of anything I go through, my first thought is always that I have not been compassionate enough with others in the past. Like every time I experience something, I gain this new depth of understanding, and I begin to think about all the times I've had encounters with other people and they've told me about something that they just went through or that they're going through. And while I'm not rude, I hear their story and it doesn't move me the way that it should. I don't slow down and stop with them the way that I should. I don't think about it and pray about it the way that I should afterwards until I've gone through something really similar. And now I understand the depth of what they're experiencing. And so it changes me. And so on the backside of suffering, I'm always so much more compassionate. I'm always have so much more wisdom. And honestly, there's just so much more of Jesus that's now visible in me. And I've not suffered nearly as much as many. But what I've seen in my own life is that the process of suffering, it concentrates the wisdom and the love and the compassion of God in me. It takes it and it boils it down to its most essential essence and makes it clearer. It makes it more obvious. And so Peter is saying, listen, keep your hope in the city that's to come. You know, as you go through hard times, realize your hope is not in anything here, but it's in another city entirely. And just know that as you go through this, all the junk and all the filler is being burned off of you, and it's exposing what is left to be increasingly pure gold. So here's the thing. We talked about the fact that when you leave this city, there's only one thing you can bring with you. See, when you leave this city for the new city, the only thing you can bring with you is who you have become. And God is very interested in making that all it can be. We're going to finish with this last thought. We're actually skipping down a few verses just to kind of sum it up. But in verse 12, Peter says this interesting little line that just gets my attention and just fills me with some hope. He says, even angels long to look into these things, like what you're going through. He's saying, listen, from your perspective, from your life, from your experiences, even the angels in heaven are looking at you, wishing they were able to see all of this from where you're sitting. So here's the last point. We're almost done here. Even though they were attained through trial, there are things about you that even angels are enamored by. Get your head around that. Even though these things in you, these qualities, these traits are being attained through fire, through trial, there are things about you that even angels are going to be enamored by. And so what's eternally done for you in the new city, that was bought by the blood of Jesus. And what's being done in you right now is being brought to pass through trial, through suffering. But having said all of that, looking at the life that's awaiting you in the new city, looking at the beauty that God is creating in you, even through struggle, it says that even angels are awestruck looking into what God is up to in you. Man, let that sink in for a second. From their perspective, the angels can see what is being done in you right now. They can see the magnificence of everything that's awaiting you in the city to come. And they're putting all of the pieces of this together. And they're thinking about what it will be like when all that's been accomplished for you and all that's being done in you, when it all fully and finally comes together. And they're enamored by it all. I want to leave you with a quote from Warren Wiersbe. We can read through this together. I think it'll be on your screen. It says, "This hope that we have does not put us in rocking chairs where we complacently wait for the return. It puts us in the marketplace and on the battlefield, and it keeps us going when burdens are heavy and battles are hard. Hope is not a sedative. It's a shot of adrenaline." I'm going to say that last line again because that is powerful. If you could print that on the inside of your eyelids this morning, I would love it if we could. When burdens are heavy and battles are hard, hope is not a sedative. It's a shot of adrenaline. In just a minute here, we're going to go into our last song of the day. But I want to encourage you, as we're going through this song, maybe you haven't put your hope in Jesus. Maybe you haven't put your confidence in Jesus. Or maybe it was such a long time ago and you've kind of just left that in the past. I want to encourage you to put your hope in the Son of the benefactor today. That story is for you this morning. That God did create a reality to replace this broken one, and we're going to all experience that together someday. But the key to that, the ticket to being there, is putting your hope and your confidence in Jesus. And so if that's you today and you're saying, man, I'm recommitting myself to following Jesus, I would really challenge you. As soon as the song starts, that phone number will be up again. Text that phone number and just text following. They're just going to send you a quick text to say thank you, and they're not going to bother you. They're not going to do anything weird with you, but we just want to celebrate that with you. And so if that's you making that decision to put your hope and your confidence in Jesus today, then just text Jesus to that number. Or maybe it's for the first time, or maybe it's just for the first time in a long time. But we would love to know, we'd love to celebrate with you today that you have put your hope in Jesus, and that city that God has created, that reality that God has restored, which will one day be the reality for us, that'll be yours as well. And then all that you walk through will not be in vain, because God will be reproducing a character in you that when it's reunited with what he does for you, when what he does in you is reunited with what he's done for you, it'll all be worth it. I'm praying for you guys. I know that there's so many of you who made that decision, that you're putting your trust in Jesus again, maybe for the first time, or maybe just for the first time in a long time. I want to say thanks, and I want to encourage you, take that simple step. text us on that number and let us know. We'd love to just hear from you. We'd love to celebrate that with you. And again, if you're looking for someone to pray with you personally, you can text prayer to that number. And so if you've made the decision to follow Jesus, first time or just first time in a while, text Jesus to that number. And then if you just need someone to pray with you or even just talk with you and kind of go back and forth with you, we'd love to be that person. And so you can text prayer to that number as well. Guys, thanks so much for joining us on this live feed today. I did want to let you know and just remind you, we have the virtual foyer, the Zoom meetings for really all age groups, all of our elementary kids. There should be a link in the comments as soon as we end here today that you can follow to the elementary Zoom meeting. There will be a link for the student ministry one as well for our middle school and high school students. And then also there will be a link for just the regular grown-up folks who want to just hang out together and just talk to each other in a Zoom meeting as soon as we wrap this up here in just a minute. And I'm going to pray to conclude our time together, but guys, I want to say thank you so much for joining us. If it's your first time joining us, or maybe just first time in a long time in a while, I want to encourage you to keep joining us Sunday mornings at 10. We'll be doing this live on here through the duration of this time. And then as we come back in person, I know that day still may be weeks or a month or more away, but we would love to join with you guys in person when that opportunity comes again. Can't wait to see you guys face to face. Can't wait to join around you guys and just be with you in person again. Let's pray. Father, we're so grateful for your love. We're grateful for the fact that you don't do things in half measures. You weren't satisfied in just slipping in some little blessings here and there and just cleaning up some of the more broken places of this world. But you wanted to do it all the way. So you've built through Jesus a whole new world. And our hope is not in just a sterilized version of this broken reality, but our hope is in a whole new reality. And so we put our joy and our hope in that day that is to come. And we look for a blessing, and we look for a fullness, and we look for all of that in a full way in the day that is to come. And in the here and now, in these days, many of us will walk through trials. Many of us will walk through sufferings. And I thank you that even through challenging circumstances, you're making good of them, that you're refining us, that you're making more of us. And so a day is coming when what you've already done for us will be combined with what you've done in us. And that is going to be a good day indeed. And so we give you thanks for that. Give us strength, give us encouragement, give us hope in these ending days. And we give you thanks in Jesus' name. Amen. Guys, God bless you and have a great Sunday. We'll see you next week.